The smug fool that is Gavin Newsom is how all smiles and chuckles as he's promoting this ballot initiative. And here's what he's saying in these press conferences.
The Election Rigging Response Act is the sign above your head right now. What a
fool.
It's in response to what happened in Texas, in response to the President of the United States doing what he tried to do after he lost the election in Georgia when he dialed the Secretary of State of Georgia and asked to find 11 to 12,000 votes. Now he's got a midterm. You've got all the headwinds with midterms. He recognizes he's likely to lose the midterms, which means he's going to have a co-equal government with real oversight authority. So he called
not if you keep doing this.
Texas, and he said, quote unquote, I'm entitled, his words, not mine, to 5 seats. And it triggered a response in California, and it's triggered an outcry across the United States.
This dude is so unbelievably smug. The contempt that Gavin has for ordinary Americans is as palpable as his hair gel, and the arrogance drips through every word. But I'll hand him one thing. At least he's transparently corrupt. He's not even bothering to hide it. He's openly admitting the so-called Election Rigging Response Act is more of just an election rigging act. A retaliatory measure designed to manipulate maps in California for the sake of holding on to power at the national level. So think about it, folks. He's not talking about solving homelessness, fixing rampant crime in California, or lowering the cost of living for families. He's talking about gaming the system so that Democrats don't lose more seats in Congress. That's not governance. It's just straight up power hoarding. Let's take a moment to debunk the narrative that Gavin casually throws in there like a hand grenade. The idea that what is happening in Texas is similar to the Democrat conspiracy theory that Trump called Georgia and asked them to find votes during the 2020 election. Now, that is a Democrat's favorite ghost story, and they love to retell it at every single opportunity to get. But the truth is, Trump never asked anyone to invent votes. The full transcript of that Georgia call shows he was pressing local officials to look for what he and his team believed were already miscounted or discarded ballots. You can disagree with Trump's interpretation, but the idea that he literally demanded fake votes be created out of thin air is pure Democrat propaganda. It's a distortion Democrats weaponize to delegitimize any questioning of the electoral process that they benefited from, while conveniently ignoring the fact that many of those practices, like mass mail-in ballots rushed through in 2020, were never tested or trusted by the public beforehand, and that they also conveniently benefited from the exact same process that Trump was trying to pull from. Democrats greatly benefited from ballot harvesting and curing during the 2020 election. It's how Joe Biden magically got over 10 million votes than any other Democrat politician in over a decade and a half. It's how magically pallets of votes would just get dumped overnight in different cities. This isn't a conspiracy theory, folks. It's how they did it. It's why they installed these new voting practices as last-minute efforts with very little regulation so they could just effectively count as many votes as possible for their side, while also conveniently creating a system where votes that were for the other side could be very quickly discarded with zero accountability. Never been more evident that what Gavin is doing here is just your classic case of Democrat projection. Accuse your opponents of rigging elections while you redraw maps and tilt the board in your own favor. Call it a defense of democracy when in reality it's just slow suffocation of democracy. This is the broader cultural trick Democrats have mastered. Redefine words until they no longer mean what they say. That's why they call everybody a Nazi, so they can effectively lower the standard, make it mean absolutely nothing, and just keep the punch and apply it as broadly as possible. The same thing is happening here with this election rigging or voter integrity and all this other BS that they're floating as a part of this campaign that supposedly is meant to serve the interests of Californians, while also conveniently going against the interests that Californians have already voted for twice. Funny how that works, huh? That because Democrats don't want fair elections. They want pure Democrat control. That means selectively enforcing rules against their enemies while exempting their friends just so they can keep expanding their power. It's a real danger, folks. When voters see this play out, when they see their will, like California's earlier demand for independent redistricting commissions overturned in the name of Democrat partisan survival, it destroys trust in the system itself. That collapse of trust is the real crisis Democrats are creating in this state. Not Trump, not Texas, not some imaginary phone call that happened in Georgia. It's the slow death of confidence in democracy in this state, poisoned not by the will of the people, but by politicians like Gavin Newsom, who claim to protect it while at the same time completely undermining it, spending, in fact, close to $200 million of taxpayer money to run a special election so he can undermine the will of the people. It's absolutely shameless.
So what's different about this, we're finally doing something. It's not about whether or not we should do something, it's how we should do something. So this is what's different about our approach. To your question, I hope it also inspires other governors to move from the bully pulpit to the ballot or to a legislative strategy, because everything is at risk. You saw today, they sent ICE agents. I don't need to say anything more. I just hope everyone is listening. Border Patrol was sent to this location to coincide with this press conference. That is authoritarianism. What more do you need to know? It's about intimidation, and that's what it's all about. This is about intimidating, not just intimidating people that happen to be assembled here today, but it's about fundamentally reshaping our notion of what a democracy is about, intimidating people into silence and complicity. That's what Donald Trump is all about.
You know, it's interesting that Gavin wants to be the head of the federal government while openly opposing the enforcement of federal law, a contradiction that perfectly captures the political moment Democrats are currently going through. Here you have a governor who presides over the nation's largest so-called sanctuary state, where laws are selectively enforced based on ideology, accusing others of authoritarianism simply because Border Patrol showed up to a press conference event where he was quite literally rolling back an authoritarian measure that would be trampling on the rights of Californians, something that people of this state had already decided over a decade ago. Now, to be clear, Border Patrol showing up to Gavin's presser isn't authoritarianism. That's just the federal government exercising its authority to enforce the law, something Californians haven't seen in our backyard for years. What Gavin is really doing here is just classic projection, right? Painting law enforcement as intimidation while ignoring the ways his own party uses cultural institutions, media narratives, and legislative maneuvers to silence dissent and entrench themselves with more power. This exchange isn't just about immigration or Trump. It's about a broader trend where Democrats define democracy not as the rule of law or the will of the people, but as the uninterrupted dominance of their worldview. And when that dominance is challenged, folks, suddenly enforcement becomes intimidation and opposition becomes authoritarian. It's a dangerous inversion of meaning, and it reveals just how hollow the Democrat rhetoric has become in the fight to preserve its shrinking cultural influence.